So I am extremely happy to be with DK Green this morning, somebody that I have known for over a decade now,
Gosh, yes,
a
easily, yes.
long time in dog years. Um, so I'll allow him to introduce himself within the context of what we're talking about today, and then I will kind of fill in a little bit afterwards about the reasons for this call. So
Excellent,
over to
excellent.
you.
Hi, everybody. I'm DK Green, otherwise known as DK Leather on the scene, which is the world of kink. So I'm a psychotherapist, dkgreen.com or co.uk. I'm also a shamanic practitioner, and I've also been very familiar in various communities, GSRD, gender, sex and relationship diversity. So wasn't born this handsome. I'm a trans man. And I'm part of the CNM or consensual non-monogamy communities, and of course the kink and leather, in particular for me, the leather community, which is a part of the umbrella of kink or BDSM.
So this leads me nicely onto why I wanted to grab you and talk to you because I went to see the film Pillion on Tuesday, and I thought, and I think general consensus is that it's a really positive portrayal of the BDSM scene, specifically within a sort of the gay biker community, and it's sort of being billed as a BDSM rom-com.
Hmm.
Which sort of seemed like an open door to have a bit of a conversation about what BDSM is. And for anybody who perhaps has seen the film and maybe was a bit sort of taken aback because some of the scenes are quite full on, I just felt it would be helpful to have a chat with somebody who really knows their onions. Um, so here we are. So
Hmm. Absolutely.
first question is, what is BDSM? And is it the same as being kinky?
Right. Yes, BDSM is just a fancy an acronym for basically kinky sex. And they stand for bondage and discipline, B&D, and also dominance and submission, the DNS, and sadism and masochism, the SNM. So it's sort of an overlapping, an acronym, which basically means everything from sort of vanilla heterosexual marital sex where they tie each other up or put a blindfold on or something to make sex super spicy, right the way down to, some hardcore play. Yeah. It's a sexual framework. It's the sexuality. You're either kinky or you're not. You might want to play with it. You might want to introduce it. And it's also not obligatory. It's a part of sexy fun that we can enjoy or not as we choose.
So, one of the things that I've noticed speaking to clients is that sex seems to be quite a narrow playing field, generally involving PIV, penis in vagina, penetrative
Mhm.
sex. And BDSM, the kink sort of side of things, is potentially a way of expanding the narrative, the sort of the sexual landscape that a couple or more than a couple may share. Um, there's concern that there's sort of it's associated with mental health issues, but the research has shown, obviously, that there is no greater prevalence of mental health problems within the BDSM community than anywhere else. But
Mhm.
what are the advantages? What are the good juicy things about a BDSM?
Okay. So one of the things that has been posited by people who think that kink stuff is a bit weird and a bit wrong, there's obviously something wrong with people that are doing that. In other words, ways that it's been pathologized has often been said to include things like obviously it's a mental health issue. There was something else that I was about to say that's gone right out of my head. Ah, yes, and obviously it's a result of trauma or sexual abuse, whether that be from childhood or domestic violence or whatever. And obviously those things lead to kinky, sexy people. Um, no, the difference isn't that it's more prevalent. It's actually no more prevalent. The research has been done to show that. The difference is we talk about it more. We're more open about it. We're more honest about it. So if you take 10 people off the street and only two of them are kinksters, if you like, they're the ones who are going to have talked about their past trauma and their abuse, because everything, when you take sex into the world of kink, it does require an awful lot more self-exploration, self-examination, and openness, because negotiation between two humans who want to do this stuff has to be really honest and open. So yes, it's not that it's more prevalent, it's just that we talk more about it. So what's the juicy, exciting stuff about it, you asked specifically?
Mhm.
Um, talk about how to spice things up in the bedroom. Oh, I just want to qualify.
Mm.
BDSM also isn't just about sex, and we tend to link the two like they're inexplicably linked. And actually, I know a lot of asexual people who enjoy kink, because it's a way that they can explore intimacy without sex, and sex is so sort of normative in our socialization that that seems to be the be all and end all. Well, for asexual people, it's not.
Mm.
They don't get it. They don't understand the allure or the attraction or the fizzy feelings of wanting to get sexy. They just don't have that, or to a certain and lesser degree, because like everything else, it's a spectrum. So BDSM play can be a way of accessing intimacy that isn't actually necessarily sexual. However, if you're bored with your sex, then actually it's a great way to introduce some spice. A lot of it is about sensation. So one half of that, an acronym is, or bits of it, are all about sensation. So about exploring physical sensation, everything from sort of a bit of slap and tickle to some hardcore BDSM play. And some of it is about the mental or intellectual aspect, because I always say the best sex organ we've got is the brain. And so a really good example, which most people, even who've never talked about BDSM at all, get, is that it's quite often common for a sort of vanilla, i.e. non-BDSM, heterosexual, married cis couple to play with, they get the fellas tie and tie her up, or they put a blindfold on. But the reason that that is so successful is because once you can feel like in your head you've given yourself over, you're unable to resist, then actually it frees the inhibitions, it frees the ability to really get in the body and the moment and really enjoy the experience. So the expression freedom in bondage, for example, is a good example of that. People have found themselves far more able to access their honest sexuality when they
Mm.
don't have the excuse of going, no, 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 stop, stop. Yeah. So the juicy stuff is basically to add spice, to release inhibitions, and to experience all sorts of physical things that the body can experience in delicious ways.
Mm. There's so much that I spins off in my head after that kind of definition. And the one thing is obviously that really big communication piece that has to happen. I mean,
Yes,
as I understand it, the BDSM variables come into play in varying degrees. And for
yes,
some people, there's no sadism or masochism. For other people,
that's right.
kind of it's a psychological game and it's more
Mhm.
centered in that area or whatever. And then,
Yes, who's the boss?
yes,
Those
exactly.
games that people play. Mm.
Yes, exactly. And then also that real opportunity to surrender in a way that isn't accessible in other parts of life. There's so much sort of juggling of many different hats and roles and responsibilities and having to kind of be a certain way. And I guess
Mhm.
behind closed doors, there is that opportunity to flex different muscles, to explore different aspects of self
Mhm.
and also different aspects of a relationship,
Yes,
which feels delicious.
it is. I've been at it since the 90s, so yes, yes, it
Okay.
is.
Is there any time when BDSM is best avoided?
Yes, yes, there is. So, many years ago, in my professional capacity, I gave a talk, a keynote speech, if you like, 20 minutes, and you can find it by looking up the kink paradox, pink therapy. If you Google that, you'll find me. I look very different because it's previous version of me.
Yeah.
However, it's 20 minutes exploring, and it was specifically for therapists, but
Mhm.
it's been really useful for all sorts of people. I've seen it used in universities for various things. But it's to explore the juxtaposition of whether kink is healthy or unhealthy for a particular individual. And it's a very individual thing. So, for example, I've had clients for whom I've said you need to table kink for now until we've done some work to process a past trauma or a history,
Mm.
and then, perhaps embrace it. There are various forms of BDSM, like age play, rape play, which can be simply pattern repeating. So essentially, a person who's had an unpleasant history repeating their history, and that's an unhealthy approach. However, if you do the work, then you can enter into some real healing catharsis work using those BDSM practices from a fully informed, conscious manner, conscious intent. And you can do a lot of healing around those things. But just going into it blind when there is some kind of history of trauma or abuse is not a wise decision, because you'll re-traumatize and re-trigger. Yes, but that doesn't mean it's inaccessible to you. It may mean it's inaccessible for now. And
Mhm.
for some people, it is so inaccessible that that's not a choice that they make. They stay away from it. And that's absolutely fine too. Voluntary. That's the whole point. It's something you want to do if you want to do it, and you don't want to do if you don't want to do it. The dialogues around consent and boundaries, so sort of prevalent in the conscious sex positive communities, is massive. And guess where that comes from?
Mhm.
Kink, because we
Mhm.
learned very, very early on in the sort of 60s and 70s, really, but certainly prevalent from sort of 70s, 80s onwards, that consent and boundaries is what it's all about. So a lot of people who've never ventured into the world of conscious sexuality or kink, um, consent and boundaries is well, yeah, if you say yes you mean it, if you say no you mean it. That's kind of the limit, whereas the depth of the dialogues on consent and boundaries within kink is profound, and it's often the first time people have really had the experience of, like in a positive sex positive workshop, for example, first time they've had an experience of real consent, real embodied boundaries, and knowing and understanding what those things are. So that stuff is fantastic,
Mhm.
for everybody. I don't know, I've probably prevaricated, but I hope I've answered your question somewhere.
So what extent then should somebody know themselves before they get involved? Because in order to set a boundary, you kind of need to know
What
where
your
you
boundaries
want that
are.
to be. And yeah, so how, I mean, is there kind of almost pre-work that one does on oneself, or how does it
There
work?
can be, certainly if there is a history that's worrisome,
Mm.
then I would say, yes, that work needs to be done. However, that doesn't mean that you can't play and be exciting, and delicious in the bedroom. You merely need somebody to go on that journey with.
Mm.
So if you're both fully conscious that this is an area you're exploring, it just means doubly checking in to make sure that everybody's okay and enjoying it and having good fun, and stating clearly. Negotiation is a key part of BDSM play. What do you want? What don't you want? Where do we go? How far do we go?
Mm.
And safe words, things like that. Red, amber, green, stop. I'm reaching the edge, and go, go, go. It's fantastic. Um, Using that kind of communication
Mm.
will teach those things, consent and boundaries.
Mm.
Yeah, so you can actually enjoy some play. I wouldn't go straight in hardcore or straight. A lot of people think hardcore BDSM is whips and chains, but actually, hardcore BDSM is playing with DS, because that's messing with people's heads.
Mm.
That's literally who's the boss. You're in control of me, I'm in control of you. And that stuff can actually be more disturbing if it's
Mm.
not held really consensually with really good boundaries. So it's about really having that pre-negotiation conversation to make sure you're both on the same page. This is what we've agreed, and either of us is allowed to change our mind at any point.
Mm.
That's really crucial. But you
Mm.
said no, you're allowed to stop and change your mind at any point.
Mm.
If this is good, this is good. Oh wait, I'm not sure about that. Stop, reframe, try something else.
Mm.
Yeah.
That sounds like it's sort of tapping into one of my mantras, which is slow down,
Yes.
go really slow, so you have time to feel.
One of the downsides of being new is that it's often there's an expression called sub frenzy, but this is equally true with DOMs. There's often a rush and a glee. It's like having a sweet shop opened, and suddenly I want to try all the things and do all the things now, yesterday. And sometimes that leads people into tripping up, making mistakes. So you're absolutely right. Take it slow. Take it slow. I often use the Cadbury's caramel advert. Sorry for the product placement, but slow down, because that's where you find it. You find, oh yes, now, and also a lot of sensation. The body only accepts slowly. So
Mm.
it's fine to do this, really super fine. But if you start doing this straight away off the bat, the body's going to react in an unpleasant way. However, guess what? You can start doing this and slowly play with that sensation,
Mm.
and the body keeps up. The mind can keep up, but also the body starts producing all sorts of fun hormones to play with, endorphins and dopamine and serotonin and all sorts of exciting stuff. Um, so yeah, slow is certainly to start with. There are some people who do enjoy something like CP, corporal punishment, which is big pain, fast.
Mm.
Um, but that's not common. It's more
Mm.
common for somebody to work up to that, yeah, or to not even go that far, to be
Mm.
quite happy down here in the middle bits of juicy, sexy sensation rather than pleasure and pain.
Mm.
Pleasure and pain are intrinsically linked. Um, Everybody's wired differently. For some people, pain is a real pleasure. For some people, tickling their way up to the edges of pain is exciting and dangerous and scary. But that's as far as it wants to go, and that's fine. Yeah, we're all on all of these things in sexuality are a spectrum. Yeah, and kink is no different.
Mm. So is somebody born kinky?
It's a great question. So I tend to think of all these things in terms of uh, consensual non-monogamy, kink, your bisexual, straight, het, grey sexual, asexual. They're all a part of a sexuality spectrum, which instead of a line from here to here, because our society loves to binary everything, you're either black or you're white, you're either this or you're that. Um, it's more like a bell curve, and I don't just mean one line. I mean all of these things are on this sort of huge discus of bell curve, and you just have to find where you are in all of these delicious things. And we're all different. We're all wired differently. For me, I think that in some contexts, for some people, absolutely, it's how you're wired. Yeah. So, for example, the gay man who gets married with kids and doesn't finally understand who they truly are until, later in life.
Mm.
They just missed where they were on the bell curve and they assumed the binary that socialization tells them.
Mm.
Yeah. And I think all of those things are equally true. Kink, non-monogamy, um, they are certainly absolutely 100% part of my sexuality. Um, do I think I was wired, nature or nurture? I
Mm.
would say because I'm an and person, not an or person. So I would say partly some of my experiences and partly it's how I'm wired and how I was born. In the same way as being transgender. I was born that way. Just took me a long time to figure it out. Because the socialization binary tells you you're this or you're this. You're pink or you're blue. And it took me a long time to get out of that. And we also didn't have the internet and we also didn't have the education around it. So I had no clue. It was off my radar completely. I didn't even know it was a thing. I lived in the countryside as well. So, I had no chance of figuring out who I was until later, and I had enough information and enough light bulb moments for me to go, oh, that makes sense. Thank Christ for that. Yeah, that makes my previous life make sense, all of it.
Yeah.
And the same thing has gone with kink, and the same thing with consensual non-monogamy. That was a long answer.
Great answer. So I went on a workshop a while ago, where we were invited to explore the kind of the power dynamics that existed, sort of that sprung up between two people. So we were moving around the room, and as we came face to face with somebody, we just felt into whether there was a, who was who was where. Sometimes it was like
Mm-hmm.
this. There were a
Mm-hmm.
few times where it was very much like that, and nobody was going anywhere. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it really spoke to the organic nature of the individuality that
Mm-hmm.
is explored in a relationship with different people.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that speaks also to the different expressions of BDSM that can be explored. It might be psychological, it might be physical, that
Mm-hmm.
sort of sexual, non-sexual side of things.
Mm, mm.
It's
It can be
something.
all the things or none of the things. We are all very much we are all individuals. But the bottom line is it's finding what works for you. So with kink, which is what the conversation is about today with
Mm,
BDSM, most people will try it like a smorgasbord and dip in here and dip in there and try this and try that. And they might enjoy all sorts or not enjoy, but
mm,
they find what works for them. So, for example, with DS, with dominance and submission, you talked about power dynamics. There's
mm,
a lot of things, again, this is about self-awareness. There's a lot of things that we need to be conscious of. So, for example, gendered power dynamics is a
mm,
thing. Men have the power in the world currently, so that's a gender disparity. Another gender incongruence might be age. So somebody who's older has more experience in the world. So there are stuff that's already there influencing a power dynamic. So it's about knowing those, being really self-aware of those if you want to play with it. And I've often, people say, "Oh, well, I'm a submissive and da da da." Actually, if you've got no personal power, you've got nothing to have a power exchange with. So you have to have enough of your own personal power. First of all, you can't be somebody's sir or master or whatever. You can't master someone until you've mastered yourself. Yeah. And you can't offer your power to someone else that you love and trust completely, that you've had all the negotiation with, if you have no personal power. Yeah, if you have no power to exchange, it's
mm,
not a safe place. You have to be more self-aware and present and okay with who you are, a sense of self, in order to be able to play with that and offer it to somebody else. Yeah. You're
mm.
talking to a shrink who's also a kinkster, so you're going to get a lot of
Yes.
that.
It sort of speaks of a lens through which there's an invitation for huge amounts of personal development, exploration,
100%.
really looking at our place in society, our place relationally, our place with ourselves.
Yes.
And that's an incredible thing to do for anyone in any context at all.
Yes, 100%. So much self-growth, self-awareness. As I say with like the consent and boundaries conversation, BDSM is a world in which you can really explore yourself and all of those things, that doesn't often happen in our standard socialization. Standard binary, get married, have kids, white picket fence, nine to
Mm,
five job, stuff like self-exploration
mm.
can literally be missed. You can be an old person and finally go, I wonder who I am. It might never have cropped up in your life. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
BDSM, I think, is a great field in which to really discover yourself. Yeah.
I guess there's also that element of courage that I think anybody who steps away from the sort of cisgendered heterosexual path
Yes.
has to embrace. Or I mean, it's a shame that that's the case, but within our society, we have a blueprint for how relationships are supposed to be, and we go this.
Hmm.
You get married, you have kids, you da, 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 the relationship escalator.
Hmm.
And the sort of the edges that are met just by saying, well, actually, maybe that thing that we're all supposed to love and embrace is not me.
Yes.
And even that in itself opens up a sort of a lot of vulnerability, a lot of questioning, a lot of,
Hmm. Often a lot of guilt and shame for
yeah,
being non-normative.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a huge process. Most people go through it. If you happen to find that, for example, sexually you're a submissive, you'll go through all sorts of guilt and shame about that. Feminism exists, it's a thing, and yet what am I doing? It's like the original idea about feminism was to give women a choice. It wasn't to say thou shalt go out to work and be a super career woman. Some women actually prefer to stay home and cook and clean and look after the kids. And that's the choice. Feminism was about the choice, not you should be better and different. Yeah. And this is very, very similar. It's about the choice. Socialization tells us we don't have a choice. And
Mm.
actually, we do. And of course, who questions that most of all? There's a huge overlap with neurodivergence because they
Mm.
question everything from the word go. Someone who isn't neurotypical and easily socialized will always ask why from the word go. Why is it done that way? Well, why can't we try this way? So there's the Venn diagram of neurodivergence within kink, poly, all these trans is practically a circle. That doesn't mean that everybody who's kinky is neurodivergent. It does mean there's a larger proportion of us.
Mm. So, I mean, you obviously said, as you've said, you're coming from a sort of therapeutic kink space
Yeah.
angle. I know that not all kink spaces are created equal. Um,
Hmm.
there are some which are very less conscious than others. There's a lot of sort of
Yes.
drugs and alcohol going on in some spaces,
Hmm.
and in others, it's very much alcohol off the table and an invitation for a more embodied, conscious
Yep.
experience. So I guess it's
Dry events are becoming more and
yeah,
more common as people recognize the
yeah.
influence that alcohol or drugs has on a person, including around consent. Can you truly consent if you are drunk or on drugs? Because you're not in your fully embodied present self. Um, yeah, thankfully now there are more and more events that are dry. There are also events, of course, where it's optional, and lots of us choose to be. Um, dry, sober, um, even if there is drink available at an event, because frankly, I won't play with someone who has had drink or drugs. I don't think you can fully consent if you aren't fully present. You
And presumably as well, the body will respond differently
know?
if you're kind of under the influence of anything as well.
Absolutely, the body responds differently. But for me, I think the priority is consent. I don't want to play with anyone unless there's absolute consent. And you can't absolutely consent if you're under the influence. You'll say yes to something that you would say no to. Yeah,
So
that's
yes, yes,
that's my experience.
yeah. So it would seem that it would serve somebody well to find somebody who knows what they're doing. Would that be the case?
Yes, yes. But in an ideal world, also newcomers often struggle to find someone who's old school, old hat, knows the stuff, because they've usually been doing it long enough. They have a partner or partners, and
Mm.
fulfilled. But newcomers can come in and find someone to work with, to explore with, to attend workshops with. You shouldn't be playing with anything unless you've seen how it's used. Find someone to explore with so that you can both experience that together. You don't have someone who's, very experienced. Obviously, in an ideal world, that would be fantastic. But it's not an ideal world. And very experienced Kinksters are quite often pretty busy, with their own people. So yeah, but certainly you can attend workshops and be taught by them and learn from them. Yeah.
So what would be the qualities of a good teacher in that space, or perhaps even, a good dom? What because in the film, one of the things that comes across about one of the main characters is he's this sort of remote, detached, sort of almost
Yeah.
arrogant sort of personality. I guess
Yeah.
this is the
Yeah.
sort of mainstream
Well,
perspective.
I love a good sexy film, especially depicting BDSM as well as the next person. I thoroughly enjoy them. And just like the dialogue around, I was going to say 9.5 weeks, that goes back a very long way. Um, my initial first movie involving kink. Um, and with Shades of Grey, of course, 50 Shades of Grey, of course. Um, so, everybody wanted to know my opinion at the time, and they're doing the same thing for Pillion, of course. And I think there are fabulous things about it, which is presence. It's actually showing this stuff exists. Okay. Some of it is sexy and juicy and fun. Same with 9.5 Weeks. Same with 50 Shades of Grey, and all the books, of course. There's bazillion. There are problematic aspects in the same way that having more trans representation in the media is fantastic, except when it's negative, except when the trans woman turns out to be a bloke pretending or is a killer or whatever. So I think kink is very at risk of that, because media wants to sensationalize. It wants to project something tasty enough for people to watch. So coercion is a thing. Coercion, sort of convincing or persuading someone to do, which is not good. That's messing with power. That's abuse of power dynamics rather than exploring them and having delicious fun with them. The cliche that the perfect dom is somehow this detached. It's a little bit like the cliche of the therapist being a blank screen. You want a human to talk to, not a wall, you know? And I think it's very similar. What those movies don't show is the care, the communication, the beforehand, the conversations, the cuddles afterwards to make you feel better, both of you. Yeah, they don't show those things because they're not sensational. They're the boring bits where we take care of each other as human beings. Yeah. So it's a little bit like the latest Mills and Boon of kink. Yeah, you've got the bad guy who turns out to be the good guy, really, but is he? You know, it's a very Mills and Boon storyline. Same with 50 Shades of Grey. Great fun to watch. Also, there was some serious consent issues in there, and you know, same with 9.5 Weeks. In fact, one of the things that these media representations often do, to my chagrin, is you can't be that way unless there's something wrong with you. So they're playing into the trope that if you're kinky, obviously there's mental health issues or there's a history of abuse or whatever. Always 50 Shades of Grey, great Mills and Boon story. What a shame. The very title itself was derived from he was 50 Shades of fucked up. Excuse my language. But that was what it was to represent. In 9.5 Weeks, she leaves eventually because she realizes there's something wrong with him. It's not healthy. Yeah. And Pillion, you've got a similar sort of vibe of there's something wrong with this guy because he's so cold, he's so aloof, he's unemotionally engaged, etc., etc. So I dislike that aspect of things. Yeah, I think it's a shame that although we're getting much more presentation in the media, which is great representation, should I say, it's a shame that it has to imply that there's something wrong with the person doing so. Yeah. And that spoils it a bit for me. So I can thoroughly enjoy the juicy sexiness of it and go, ooh, R4, it's delicious. And come away feeling like, damn, why couldn't they have used someone who wasn't unhealthy, who was healthy, who was here? But wouldn't that make for boring TV if they could show somebody who was like really got their shit together and really self-aware and still a kinky bugger, you know?
I'd like to see that one.
Yes, I'd like to see that. I'd like to make it, frankly, but yeah.
Has there been anything that you'd recommend as a good watch or read?
Oh, I think they are all. I mean, good God, 50 Shades of Grey went not just viral, but prolific. Like, there was a
Stratospheric.
few people who never read it, you know, it was bonkers. I think there's nothing out there that I would say 100% is a great representation. But there's a documentary or two. Melina and Georg did a fantastic documentary on their relationship and kink, which is on Netflix. It's just a fantastic watch. But it's the real meat and bones. It's the honesty. It's the truth of it, not the glorified sensationalism of it. But I think it's okay to watch these things and enjoy them just the same as it's okay to read Mills and Boon if that's your thing. It's okay to get lost in that fantasy and enjoy it because it's meant to be entertainment. just remember those dialogues around consent and boundaries. Remember about power dynamics. Inform yourself about those things so that you can take those parts of it with a pinch of salt. Enjoy the juicy sexiness of it whilst being aware that that's not necessarily the best way of doing things. Yeah? Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
I'm afraid I've got no books or films or anything that I can recommend and say, yes, they got it right. Um, Preaching to the Perverted was a brilliant film. It's one of the best British comedies ever, all about all sorts of stuff about BDSM in there. Um, and even that, it had some issues, but it was fantastic to watch and fun. But just keep in mind, for you, for your selfhood, awareness, consent, and boundaries. And then let free and enjoy the fantasy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess there's a couple more questions that I have.
Okay.
Um, I think one of the things that, I mean, we touched on it before, that the whole BDSM thing can seem quite scary. As
Mm.
the whips and chains thing tends to come to the fore, all the black leather, all the kind of,
Mhm.
I've noticed going around sort of some fairs that everything seems to be black or purple, and there doesn't seem to be much in the way of pink or white.
Or red.
Yes, yes,
Although
exactly.
nowadays there are, honestly, if you go, to any of the Birmingham Bazaar or London Alternative Market or Swamp in Bristol, nowadays you'll get them all. You'll get all the colours because people have grown and developed and realized not everybody wants to have a red room and do everything in black and red. Some people, their favorite color is green, and that's what they have all their kit made as. So you'll find nowadays actually the difference in 10 years is quite phenomenal. Most of the fetish fairs and sex exhibition type stuff, yeah, they play with all of the color now. You can buy cuffs in any color you like.
With fluff added.
Exactly. With fur if you want, if you like.
Okay, so we've sort of touched on workshops as well, and the fact that that's
Mm,
probably a good way, and presumably as well, you don't have to have a partner or a committed relationship
no.
or relationships to go into those sort of
Mhm,
spaces. You can explore
mhm, mhm.
one-to-one, change partners, feel the different dynamics, feel the different sort
Yeah, I
of.
mean, a lot of, for example, at the fetish fairs, they do workshops which are presentations. So you watch and you listen and you learn. You actually be involved personally. In the sort of conscious kink, sacred sexuality type circles, there are more workshops where you can explore and engage, and I've been on and run some myself. Um, and yeah, you can be there as a couple and only play with each other. You can be there as a group of friends who only want to play with each other. You can be on their own and play with whoever else is on their own and available and wishes to. Yeah. Those experiences I think are fantastic because they are, rather than just wandering into a club with your sparkly brand new cane and flogger and just playing, where you do have dungeon monitors, you have people who watch out for unsafe play, but otherwise you're pretty much left to your own devices. Um, if you ask the hosts, chances are they'll be happy to show you something or introduce you to someone who will show you something or teach you something. But generally speaking, they just go in and do. Whereas the workshops themselves more often are you can try. I've even run events where, like the fetish fairs, I ran one for several years, where we had a workshop which would always spill over into everybody wanting to have a go. It was great fun. Uh, so yes, having a space that's well held, I think, is really important. I think going to parties and clubs is great fun, and has all sorts of possibility. Um, but perhaps don't be quite so gung ho as to just get stuck in without having some education on it first. You shouldn't be using a toy if you don't know how it feels, and if somebody hasn't taught you how to use it safely.
Mm,
Um, and that's just toys. I've seen people use wonderfully. The best tools we've got are hands.
mm,
And I've seen people misuse them, because they haven't got educated about, for example, bodily anatomy and where it's safe and where it's dangerous to poke or prod or hit or whatever. Um, so yeah, try and find the spaces where there's someone who's knowledgeable, who can hold the space while people explore.
Mm. There's been quite a lot of leaking from porn into sort of the conventional sexual narrative around choking and things like that,
Oh,
which is yeah.
of all the play that people do, breath play is probably the most dangerous and the most stupid. I've actually run a breath play workshop since the 90s, and it's regular. I've done it like 4 times this year. Various events invite me to do it, Kinkfest and Birmingham Fet Weekend and all sorts. Um, but you should never play with something like that without having some serious education. Breath play is literally the most dangerous form of kink that you can do. Literally,
Mm.
people die. So don't do that stuff unless you've had decent education. And pretty much, floggers. Okay, you might be sort of a married couple playing in the bedroom. You can't do too much harm unless you really wallop someone with a handle by accident in their kidneys. That's there are dangers in all these things. But also, just some bog standard sex positions can cause injury, if it's not done right.
Particularly as we get
Um,
older.
yeah, exactly. But something more serious using canes or medical play like needles and scary stuff like that. Absolutely, you have to educate yourself. You have to attend workshops. You have to be taught, or find someone who really knows what they're doing to show you and teach you.
Mm.
It's not worth the risk. It's as simple as that. Making your sex life super juicy and fun and fruity is all well and good. Let's not injure ourselves. Let's get educated and do it right. Yeah.
That seems like a good place to finish.
Fantastic. Excellent.
So thank you very much for your time. There's more I want to talk to you about. There's like a whole encyclopedia full of things I would like to talk to you about, but
It's a long conversation, and most people spend years exploring this stuff.
yeah.
So yeah, we've covered what we can cover, which is a small intro, basically.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Uh,